Part 1, The Summons. The Holographic Decree. Dr. Ethan Voss stared at the flickering hologram above his cluttered desk, its cerulean glow reflecting in his tired eyes. The ornate script seemed to mock him, each curve and flourish a reminder of his impending doom. By decree of the Galactic Women's Tribunal, the message began, "Your presence is required." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Ethan ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair, his mind racing. Ever since Earth had stumbled into the galactic community in 2215, life had become a bewildering tapestry of wonders and woes. The wonders were undeniable, technologies that defied human comprehension, interstellar travel, and the sheer diversity of life in the cosmos. The woes, however, were far more personal, especially for human males of a certain age and genetic disposition. Ethan, unfortunately, fit the bill perfectly. Agent Lyra's arrival. A sharp rap at the door jolted Ethan from his thoughts. Dr. Voss, a crisp, authoritative voice called out, "This is Agent Lyra with Galactic Affairs. We need to discuss your summons." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He briefly entertained the idea of barricading himself in his lab, but he knew it was futile. The tribunal's reach was long, its authority absolute. With a sigh of resignation, he called out, "Come in." The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a woman who looked like she had been carved from granite. Agent Lyra, her uniform immaculate and her expression unyielding, surveyed his lab with thinly veiled disapproval. "I assume you've received the notification," she stated, bypassing any semblance of pleasantries. Ethan nodded, gesturing weakly at the holographic summons. "There must be some mistake. I'm a researcher, not whatever it is you're looking for." Agent Lyra's lips tightened, a flicker of something akin to pity crossing her eyes. "There's no mistake, Dr. Voss. Your genetic profile has been deemed highly compatible with several non-human species currently facing severe population decline. As per the Galactic Reproduction Treaty of 2220, you are hereby conscripted for off-world breeding duty. The journey begins." Ethan stared at her, speechless. "Off-world breeding duty? You can't be serious." "I have rights." "Your rights," Agent Lyra replied coldly, "are superseded by galactic law and the greater good of interspecies cooperation. Now, you have 2 hours to get your affairs in order before transport arrives. Pack light, you won't need much where you're going." With that, she turned on her heel and strode out, leaving Ethan alone with the crushing reality of his situation. 2 hours. He had 2 hours to say goodbye to his life, his work, his dreams. He frantically called his sister, Clara, choking out a brief explanation and promising to stay in touch, knowing full well that communication with Earth would be limited, if not impossible. He tried to contact his mentor, Dr. Elias, but only reached his voicemail. "Damn it," he muttered, slamming the phone down. Ethan packed a small bag with a few changes of clothes, his toothbrush, and a worn copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a small act of rebellion against the absurdity of his situation. As the transport ship approached, casting a long shadow over the research facility, Ethan felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. This was it. There was no escape. The Tribunal's headquarters. The journey to the Galactic Women's Tribunal took 3 days in hyperspace. Ethan spent most of the time staring out the viewport, watching the swirling vortex of faster-than-light travel, trying to reconcile himself to his fate. He tried to read, but the words swam before his eyes. He tried to sleep, but nightmares of alien harems and genetic experimentation plagued his dreams. When they finally emerged into normal space, Ethan gasped. The Tribunal's headquarters was a colossal space station, easily the size of a small moon. Its sleek, organic curves resembled a giant lotus blossom floating in the void, a symbol of serene power. As their shuttle approached, Ethan noticed hundreds of other small crafts swarming around the station like busy insects. Some, like his own, were arriving, carrying their cargo of unwilling conscripts. Others were departing, no doubt ferrying other men to their new lives as glorified studs for alien races. The thought made his skin crawl. The tribunal's verdict. The shuttle docked with a gentle thud, and Ethan was escorted through gleaming corridors by a pair of blue-skinned guards. Their elongated limbs and large, almond-shaped eyes marked them as members of the Zari species, one of the elder races that had helped found the galactic community centuries ago. They were silent, impassive, their every movement conveying an air of quiet authority. They brought him to a cavernous chamber filled with rows of benches. Dozens of human men milled about, all looking as shell-shocked as Ethan felt. Some were arguing with officials, their voices rising in futile protest. Others sat in stunned silence, their eyes glazed over with disbelief. A booming voice echoed through the chamber. All new arrivals, please proceed to Processing Station 7 for initial screening and assignment. Ethan shuffled forward with the crowd, his mind racing. There had to be a way out of this, some loophole, some way to appeal. He clung to the hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that someone, somewhere, would recognize the injustice of his situation and set him free. At the processing station, a bored-looking Zari female scanned him with a handheld device. Name, she droned, her voice flat and monotonous. Ethan Voss, he replied, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Look, there's been a mistake. I'm a geneticist, not some breeding stock. I have important research to do. The Zari cut him off with a dismissive wave. Occupation is irrelevant. Genetic compatibility is all that matters here. She tapped something into her console, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. You've been assigned to Tribunal Case 77249. Proceed to Hearing Room 12 immediately. Before Ethan could protest further, he was whisked away by another set of guards. They marched him down twisting corridors, the silence broken only by the rhythmic click of their heels on the polished floor. The air grew heavy with anticipation, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. They reached an imposing set of doors marked Hearing Room 12. The doors slid open, revealing a circular chamber dominated by a raised dais. Seated upon it were three alien females, a Zari, her blue skin shimmering in the soft light, a reptilian Slick, her scales gleaming with iridescent colors, and a being Ethan didn't recognize, with iridescent feathers instead of hair and eyes like polished obsidian. But it was the figure standing before the dais that drew Ethan's eye, a stunningly beautiful blue-skinned woman clad in diaphanous robes that left little to the imagination. She turned as Ethan entered, fixing him with eyes like liquid silver. Ah, she purred, her voice rich and melodious. The human specimen arrives at last. Ethan bristled at being called a specimen, but before he could retort, the Zari judge spoke. This tribunal is now in session, she intoned, her voice echoing through the chamber. Case 77249, the petition of Senator Naira Voss for a human breeding partner. Ethan Voss, you stand accused of attempting to evade your galactic duty. How do you plead? Ethan's mind reeled. This was madness. Not guilty, he blurted out. I mean, I object to this entire proceeding. You can't just conscript people for breeding. The blue-skinned woman, Senator Naira, presumably, let out a tinkling laugh. Oh, my. Such spirit. I do hope you'll keep that fire once we're married, darling. Married? Ethan sputtered. Now, wait just a minute. The slick judge cut him off with a hiss. Silence, human. You will speak only when addressed by this tribunal. Ethan clamped his mouth shut, seething with impotent rage. This couldn't be happening. The feathered judge leaned forward, fixing Ethan with her obsidian eyes. Dr. Voss, perhaps you fail to grasp the gravity of the situation. Many species within the galactic community face dire population crises. The human genome offers unique adaptive qualities that could save entire civilizations from extinction. Your participation is not optional. But I have rights. Ethan protested. Your antiquated notions of rights are irrelevant here, the Zari judge interrupted. Galactic law supersedes all local customs and regulations. You will comply, or face severe consequences. Senator Naira sidled closer, trailing a delicate blue hand across Ethan's chest. He flinched away from her touch. Come now, my pet, she cooed. The prospect of being my husband truly can't be so terrible. I assure you, the pleasures I can offer far outweigh any inconvenience. Ethan's skin crawled. I won't be a part of this, he growled. It's slavery, plain and simple. The senator's eyes flashed dangerously. Careful, human. You tread on thin ice. The slick judge leaned forward, her forked tongue flicking. Perhaps the specimen requires motivation to cooperate. Part 2, the tribunal's verdict. The arrival at Zari Prime. The journey to Zari Prime was a blur for Ethan. He spent most of it locked in his quarters aboard Senator Naira's personal yacht, alternating between fruitless attempts to reason with his captors and bouts of despairing rage. When they finally emerged from hyperspace, Ethan pressed his face to the viewport, taking in his first glimpse of the alien world that was to be his new home. Zari Prime hung in space like a glittering sapphire, its surface a swirling mosaic of deep blues and vibrant teals. As they descended through the atmosphere, Ethan saw vast cities of crystal and spires rising from azure seas. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and utterly alien. They landed at a sprawling estate perched atop a cliff overlooking an endless ocean. Senator Naira practically dragged Ethan from the ship, eager to show off her new acquisition. Welcome home, my pet, she purred, gesturing grandly. I do hope you'll find your accommodations satisfactory. You'll want for nothing here, so long as you fulfill your duties, of course. Ethan gritted his teeth, fighting back a biting retort. He had to play along, at least for now. Find some weakness, some way to escape this gilded cage. The gilded cage. As they entered the mansion, a small army of blue-skinned servants swarmed around them. Naira barked orders in her musical language, and Ethan found himself whisked away to be prepared for some sort of welcoming ceremony. Hours later, scrubbed and dressed in ornate alien finery, Ethan stood beside Senator Naira in a grand hall filled with Zari nobility. The senator proudly showed him off like a prized pet, explaining to her peers how she had procured such a fine specimen. Ethan plastered on a fake smile, all the while his mind racing. There had to be a way out of this, some flaw in their security, some sympathetic ear he could appeal to. He would find a way home, no matter what it took. But as the night wore on, and he caught glimpses of other human husbands scattered throughout the crowd, all wearing the same hollow-eyed look of defeat, a cold knot of dread formed in Ethan's stomach. What if there was no escape? What if this truly was to be his life from now on? Lyra's doubts. Lyra Voss, a genetic scientist and distant cousin of Senator Naira, watched Ethan's forced integration into Zari society with growing unease. While most of her peers reveled in the genetic benefits the humans brought, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The vacant look in Ethan's eyes, the forced smile he wore, and the whispers she overheard about his treatment fueled a quiet rebellion within her. Lyra worked in one of the leading genetic research facilities on Zari Prime, dedicated to studying and integrating human DNA into the Zari gene pool. Initially, she had been excited about the project, believing it could cure genetic weaknesses plaguing her species. But as she witnessed the dehumanization of the human conscripts, her enthusiasm waned. One evening, Lyra found herself reviewing Ethan's genetic profile. His file was thick with data, adaptability coefficients, telomere preservation factors, resistance to various toxins. It was like reading a textbook, except the subject was a living, breathing person. She paused on a note about Ethan's research on Earth, a potential cure for a rare genetic disorder. The irony was stark. He had been taken from a world where he sought to heal, to become a tool for another species' survival. A wave of guilt washed over Lyra. She closed the file, unable to look at it any longer. She knew she couldn't stand by and watch this injustice continue. But what could she do? Speaking out against the tribunal was unthinkable, especially for someone with her family connections. Open defiance would be swiftly crushed. She needed to be subtle, to work from within. Part 3, The Gilded Cage. The Senator's Estate. Ethan's days on Zari Prime fell into a grim routine. Each morning, he was awakened by the soft chime of an alien alarm, signaling the start of another day in his gilded prison. The estate was a marvel of Zari architecture, towering crystal spires, lush gardens filled with bioluminescent flora, and sweeping views of the endless azure ocean. But to Ethan, it was nothing more than a beautiful cage. Senator Nyra's presence loomed over every aspect of his life. She insisted on dining with him each evening, her silver eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and possessiveness as she questioned him about Earth, his work, and his adjustment to Zari Prime. Ethan played along, careful to keep his answers vague and his tone neutral. He knew better than to provoke her. The hidden rebellion. Lyra's secret meetings with Ethan became their lifeline. Under the guise of conducting genetic research, she visited the estate regularly, using her status as Nyra's cousin to avoid suspicion. Together, they began to document Nyra's abuses, hidden recordings of her dismissive remarks, logs of Ethan's restricted movements, and testimonies from other human conscripts who had suffered under the tribunal's decree. One evening, as they sat in a secluded corner of the estate's gardens, Lyra handed Ethan a small device. "This is a data crystal," she explained. "It contains everything we've gathered so far. If anything happens to me, you need to get this to the Galactic Senate. It's our only hope." Ethan frowned, turning the crystal over in his hands. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that? I can't even leave this estate without an escort." Lyra's expression hardened. "We'll find a way. But for now, we need to keep gathering evidence. The more we have, the harder it will be for them to ignore us." The other conscripts. Through Lyra, Ethan learned of other human conscripts scattered across Zari Prime. Many had resigned themselves to their fate, too broken or afraid to resist. But a few, like Marcus, a former soldier from Earth, were willing to fight back. Marcus had been on Zari Prime for nearly a year, forced into a marriage with a high-ranking Zari official. His spirit, however, remained unbroken. "I didn't survive 3 tours on Mars just to become some alien's trophy husband," he growled during one of their clandestine meetings. "If we're going down swinging." Ethan and Marcus quickly formed an alliance, their shared determination fueling their resolve. Together, they began to recruit others, spreading whispers of rebellion through the estate's hidden corners. The Senator's wrath. Senator Nyra, however, was not blind to the growing tension. She tightened her grip on Ethan, assigning additional guards to monitor his every move and restricting his access to the estate's communication systems. "You're mine, Ethan," she whispered one night, her voice dripping with menace. "And I don't share." Ethan's patience wore thin. One evening, during yet another lavish dinner, he finally snapped. "I'm not your pet," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I'm not your property. I'm a person, Nyra. Or have you forgotten what that means?" Nyra's eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly masked it with a cold smile. "Oh, Ethan," she purred. "You're so much more fun when you're feisty. But remember, cross me, and you'll regret it." The breaking point. The final straw came when Nyra announced her plans to host a grand celebration, showcasing Ethan to the Zari elite as her prized acquisition. The thought of being paraded around like a trophy was more than Ethan could bear. That night, he met with Lyra and Marcus in the gardens. "We can't wait any longer," he said, his voice urgent. "If we don't act now, we'll never get another chance." Lyra nodded, her expression grim. "I've been working on a plan. During the celebration, the estate's security will be focused on the guests. If we can create a distraction, we might be able to slip away." Marcus grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Leave the distraction to me. I've got a few ideas." Part 4, The Uprising. The Rebel Outpost. The shuttle touched down on a remote asteroid, its surface pockmarked with craters and dotted with makeshift structures. This was the Rebel Outpost, a hidden sanctuary for those who had escaped the Tribunal's grasp. As Ethan and Lyra stepped out of the shuttle, they were greeted by a small group of humans and aliens, their faces etched with both hope and weariness. Marcus, who had managed to escape in the chaos of the celebration, was among them. He clapped Ethan on the back, a grin spreading across his face. "You made it," he said. "I knew you had it in you." Ethan managed a tired smile. "Thanks to you. That distraction was perfect. The resistance grows." The outpost was a hive of activity. Humans and aliens worked side by side, repairing ships, gathering supplies, and planning their next move. Lyra quickly integrated herself into the group, using her knowledge of Zari technology to improve their defenses. Ethan, meanwhile, focused on rallying the human conscripts, sharing his story and inspiring others to join their cause. Word of their rebellion began to spread, reaching other outposts and even some sympathetic factions within the Galactic Senate. Slowly but surely, their numbers grew. The Tribunal's response. The Tribunal, however, was not idle. Senator Naira, furious at Ethan's escape, launched a full-scale manhunt, deploying fleets of ships to scour the galaxy for the rebels. The outpost was forced to move frequently, staying one step ahead of their pursuers. One evening, as the rebels gathered around a flickering holographic map, Lyra pointed to a cluster of stars near the edge of Zari space. "There's a supply depot here," she said. "If we can hit it, we'll not only weaken the Tribunal's forces but also gain the resources we need to keep fighting." Ethan nodded, his eyes narrowing as he studied the map. "It's risky, but we don't have a choice. We need to strike back." The attack. The attack on the supply depot was a daring operation. Under the cover of darkness, a small team of rebels, led by Ethan and Marcus, infiltrated the facility, disabling security systems and planting explosives. The Tribunal's forces were caught off guard, and the rebels managed to escape with a trove of supplies and weapons. But the victory came at a cost. Several rebels were captured, and the Tribunal's retaliation was swift and brutal. The outpost was forced to go underground, their movements even more cautious than before. The turning point. Despite the setbacks, the rebellion continued to gain momentum. Ethan's story, broadcast across the galaxy by sympathetic media outlets, inspired others to rise up against the Tribunal. Protests erupted on Zari Prime and other worlds, demanding an end to the Galactic Reproduction Treaty. The Tribunal, feeling the pressure, convened an emergency session to address the crisis. Senator Naira, desperate to maintain control, argued for a crackdown on the rebels. But her words fell on deaf ears. The tide was turning, and even some of her allies were beginning to question the morality of their actions. The final push. With the Tribunal weakened and public opinion shifting in their favor, the rebels prepared for their final push. Their target, the Tribunal's headquarters on Zari Prime. The plan was audacious. Using stolen Tribunal ships and forged credentials, the rebels would infiltrate the headquarters, seize control of its communication systems, and broadcast their evidence to the entire galaxy. As the rebels gathered for their final briefing, Ethan felt a surge of determination. This was their chance to end the Tribunal's tyranny once and for all. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice steady. "But this is it. This is our moment. Let's show the galaxy what we're made of. The rebels cheered, their spirits lifted by Ethan's words. Together, they boarded their ships and set course for Zari Prime, ready to fight for their freedom, and for the future of the galaxy.